Thank you everyone for having me today. It's really just an honor to be here and to be able to see some faces, but mostly some names from other agencies all around the state. So as I said, this is an honor. And for my position here to be able to talk to you today, I just wanted to hopefully bring you a new perspective, because as Bill mentioned, most of my experience, I have over 13 years of experience with Air Force public affairs. So my experience will hopefully be a fresh new perspective on what you can utilize as a PIO or PAO or any kind of spokesperson for your agency. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll dive right in. All right, so thumbs up if you can all see my presentation. Good? Okay. So now that you know a bit about me, I would love it if you guys could drop into the chat maybe what agency you're from and what your role is, and if we have any other PIOs, any other PAOs, or spokespeople that are representing their organization. That way we can get to know each other, because one thing you'll learn very quickly is that you're going to need to network as much as you can when you're in a role like this. What I found is in doing some of my research on public affairs and PIOs when it comes to agencies is there's usually somebody who is a sergeant or lieutenant or somebody who has another position, and a PIO is an additional role for them. So as I've already mentioned, being a PIO can be really overwhelming. It could be, it can encompass a lot of different things. So to have that role on top of your job already can be exhausting. And then I've also seen some agencies where they will have entire teams. They will have a public affairs sergeant. They will have a few PIOs if they need to, as well as a multimedia, maybe a social media content manager. They will have entire teams helping develop their communications. So wherever you are in that spectrum, I would love to get to know that. And then hopefully we can help each other out if we ever get to that point where you just need some help and you need some resources. And Bill, too, if you could help me out, if there's any questions in the chat, please just go ahead and stop me if I don't see them right away. Just let me know, jump right in.
Absolutely, we'll keep you on board there.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Community relations sergeant and social media being part of their duties. This is Woodland Police Department, Sergeant Victoria. Thank you. We have Fountain Valley here, assistant PIO. That's interesting. So there's probably a team of PIOs and you're the backup. I'm guessing that's what that is for Donnie Farmer. For PIO, manage media relations. Okay, so it sounds so far like you have people that are dedicated to certain realms of public affairs, which is great. The more people, the better. Let's see if I can go back one. There we go. So public relations, here we are. I don't know what public relations is, and at this point, I'm too scared to ask. How many of you have maybe not planned to be in this position? You have not had any training in public affairs or communications, and here you are, you find yourself up at the podium answering questions with 8 mics all around you, and you just don't know where to even begin, because that may happen, hopefully not to you, but it does. So a brief overview, a very broad overview of public relations and public affairs is just that it's the management function. And I want you guys to remember that this is a high level top priority function of managers, supervisory, executive staff to be able to manage the relationships between your publics, which is your audience, and the way that your organization relates to them. In this course, in this session, I hope to cover creating a communication brand strategy, who your audiences are, setting and reacting to the narrative, and protecting your agency's reputation. And I'll round it up with some do's and don'ts for PIOs. And then I have a blank screen. I couldn't get rid of this. I don't know where that happened. So communication brand strategy, let's dive in. So I know a lot of people probably are hoping maybe today they're going to find out how many times they need to post on Instagram, or what's the best platform. These are the things that I want you to think of as tactics. What we're going to discuss today is the strategies, because you cannot successfully implement certain tactics across your social media, across your messaging, without a very well-defined strategy on your communication. So my first point, my first best practice is, if you are not already embedded with your command team or your executive level, you need to be, because either on a weekly or a daily basis, you should be getting briefs on what is going on, what are the divisions, what's happening, what are upcoming events, what is the public saying about you and your organization. Those types of conversations you need to be involved in, if not weekly, daily. So that's my best practice number one. Number two, you want to make sure that working with your command, working with your executive staff, you define at least 2 to 3 command priorities. Now, I can give you an example for our office, which is equal justice for all, which is our tagline. You'll see that across all of our social media. You'll see that across all of our messaging. But another priority we have is to be transparent to the public and a commitment to an informed public. The last one we have is to make sure that we are also pursuing the way that we develop our trials and things like that, make sure that that is all just and equal. So let me see what we have here. Do we have any questions so far? Okay. And then what you want to do is, when you get to these priorities, when you develop these priorities with your chief or with your command, with your district attorney, whoever is your leader, you're going to want to implement those priorities into each and everything that you are messaging out to the public. And I put here a few things. You have the Pink Patch project, which is a great way to show connection to members of the community. It's a great way to raise awareness for a cause, because as you'll see in the last year, 2 years, brands or organizations that identify with purposes and causes are what the people want right now. They want to be able to know that where they are investing their time, where they are spending their money, where they are donating to, is an actionable organization that's taking pride in their causes. So XCon is another great one. It's in developing our youth, whether or not they go and become police officers, they are getting training, vital resources, they're learning just amazing stuff. And then the last one I have here is No Shave November. So these are all causes, but I want you to think about what causes are central to your audiences and what causes that are revolving throughout the year. You know, monthly awareness is always a good one. It's an easy one. This year, every month has something. This month we have Black History Month. I think we also have Heart. I believe this is also like a Heart Awareness Month. So every month, look and see what there is. I mean, there's even days where you can use some of those days and those causes to be able to share your messages with the people. So looking for, like, aggressively looking for places to share your message and share your communication priorities is like the number one successful thing you could do as a PIO or a PAO. Audiences. So this is kind of one of those things that we tend to focus on just what's in front of us, but I want us to really think, who are your audiences when you are in your agency? So I put just a few up here. There's a lot more than this, but if you're thinking of audiences for your messaging, I want you to be thinking about internally. You have your employees, you have the families of your officers, you have unions like PORAC, you have retirees, and your recruits. So those are all potential people that internal messaging, you want to make sure that you're hitting those points. You have members of your community, businesses, your local neighborhood coalitions, your local governments, chambers of commerce, media. You're gonna have to make sure you know who your media is. This is general media is all your reporters. These are the people that they want to write the first stories. Your social media audiences, who's watching you and where. Foreign media, you probably don't have to deal with too much. Specialized media would probably be like maybe something like, for us, would be our ADAs, our CDAAs, our specialized attorney stuff. So, and then government, we have legislators, local, state, and federal. It's really, really important to make sure that you are messaging out the relationships that you have, because you are most likely going to be working with other agencies. You will most likely be working maybe with the AG, with the FBI, with the DEA. So all these agencies, we want to make sure that not only do you communicate your priorities and your partnerships with them, but communicate with their team as well, their public affairs team, and make sure your messages are the same and not contradicting. Can you guys think of any other audiences that I missed that you think are really important to put your messaging in front of? Because I can see one right now that I didn't mention, but I want to know if you guys have any other ones.
Jacqueline, just so you know, as people were putting their names and agencies in the chat, there was one from Chanel at Chula Vista to maybe think about or pepper throughout your talk. Is she was wondering, you know, how to deal with those customers that come right to the records counter, to the front counter with a camera and start filming right away.
Yeah.
You know, how do you deal with those? Yeah, just wanted to make sure you saw that.
I didn't see that. Thank you for pointing that out. So I can speak to that right now. So in an instance like that, obviously, if they're not being too aggressive, you could probably deal with them. I would always suggest getting your PIO because one of the biggest roles of a PIO, as well as communicating and messaging, is also to protect everyone else in the organization. Because most likely the PIO will have information on how to speak, and we're going to talk about that later, how to speak without giving away too much, without throwing anybody under the bus, without making the organization look bad. So if you are not the PIO, you may make sure that you divert those people to the PIO. And if you are the PIO, I would definitely try, and if you can, if it's not an aggressive engagement, engage that person and diffuse the situation, as I'm sure you are all very trained in doing, and see if you can get to the heart of what it is. But always assume that everything you say will be quoted. Assume that you will be recorded for everything that you do. And sometimes you just have to say, I'm sorry, this is not something I could talk about right now. Maybe you could set up a meeting. Maybe you just got to say, hey, here's my number, give me a call back. And I have those people that are constantly calling me, constantly asking me questions that I can't answer, but half the time they just want to speak. So you're almost just letting it go so that it doesn't blow up into anything bigger. It doesn't harass anybody else in the staff. And you just have to manage those situations. And sometimes it's better to keep people like that closer to you than it is to let them go out and spoil the image of your agency. Let me see, did anybody have any other agency audiences? I don't see any, but one of the big ones here I missed was schools. Schools, maybe even like sports teams, local sports teams. Those are really good to get in with. Make sure you can network with. SROs are great for, they're great for public affairs, community engagement. So embrace your SROs. If they're not good at telling the stories, make sure that you get somebody there that can help them tell the stories of what's going on in the schools and the interactions and the engagements they have with the kids. All right, proactive strategies. So I know a lot of times we feel very reactive. Something happens, an incident has happened, and now we have to react. The best way to get ahead of that is, one, have all your messaging defined. Make sure you have all your messaging defined so that you can seek out the news media outlets with stories that align with your messaging and they can advance your narrative. So, for example, say for a command message that you have within your organization, is obviously going to be public safety, transparency. Those are two very big, easy ones. And then bridging the gap between policing and the community. So anytime that you see, every day, there should be those stories within your organization. If you can push those out, whether that be a press release, whether that be on social media, However you're pushing that out, make sure you're doing it so that nobody else is, and they're not changing your narrative. Press conferences are a great way to do this, especially if you have a big coalition, like a takedown or some sort of joint interagency thing. You could bring everybody together, hold a press conference, and again, you are leading that conversation. You will have a chance, again, at the end, usually when you're interacting with media, to be able to address the concerns and correct any narrative that is not in your favor, if you can. Responding quickly as possible is always the best way to still try and stay proactive. But if something is incorrect, make sure you are prompt in your response and you are professional. You're engaging with the community. Again, here we go back to making sure that you have those relationships, that you are able to understand what their needs are. If you have, for instance, if you have a human trafficking task force, but you're not familiar with the safe houses or the shelters that are helping out victims of human trafficking, that is a really great area where you can highlight your human trafficking task force as well as this community resource. And you're staying out of it enough to where you're saying, okay, if you are a victim and maybe you don't want to come to us as a police agency, there is this other community, this community place that you can go to. So it's an example of bridging that need in the community along with your narrative of having a human trafficking task force and what you are doing to combat it. And again, this kind of feeds into the last one, which is sharing your conditions, which is kind of falls back into transparency. You want to be able to relate to the public what your stats are, what the crime stats are, what your prevention options are, and what you're doing in response to all of that. So stay ahead of the narrative before somebody asks, well, I see so many people in this race are getting locked up, tell me why. You know, and then you could say, okay, well, here's our complete report, you know, of every race, every type of offense. You have the statistics ready to go. So those are always good to have. If you can do quarterly reporting, year-end reporting, always have the statistics ready so that nobody can change the facts. Anybody have any questions? I'm not missing anything, right? Okay, looks good to me. Everything good over there, guys? Okay. I wanted to pop over crisis communications, and this is a huge topic. I mean, this whole topic is really huge. I'm breezing through it. I hope there's a lot of questions afterwards, but for when it comes to crisis communications, I have my gold standard, which is my ABCs of communication. Be accurate, be brief, and be clear. So accuracy, brevity, and clarity. No matter what, stick to your ABCs. You want to be transparent with the public. You want to be able to protect the investigation. Usually things are ongoing in a crisis situation. If you are an agency, you may not have all the details. If it's a mass critical event, you won't have all the details, but you still want to be the one face or one point of contact, because you don't want to confuse anybody. So usually if there's a crisis situation, make sure that one person is that one person. I actually had some extra notes on crisis communications too here I wanted to share. Make sure that when you are talking to your audience, you are talking to what the crisis, how it will most affect them, and how you plan on helping that. So some crisis examples might be active shooter, which I had to do a lot of training on that. Active shooter, you want to make sure that you are establishing what's secure, who is there, and what measures you have so far taken to contain the crisis. You want to make sure that you're not giving away too much information that's going to get convoluted with the media. So again, be brief. And I would suggest if you have any kind of exercise or drilling that you do within your agency, I'm sure you guys all do this for active shooter or crisis management. If there's a bomb threat or a terrorist attack, that you know exactly where your communications command post would be. We would, wherever all your leadership would go. Sometimes it's a mobile, sometimes you have a spot, you have maybe a room designated just for that. Make sure that you as a PIO are embedded in that and that you have your plan, your crisis communication plan, which is going to consist of knowing what the agency's plan is, and then also anything that you might need in terms of gear that you might need to take with you. You might need to have all your camera gear, you might have a podium, you might have a mic just in case you are mic'd up right then and there and you have to talk. Anything else on crisis? You might want to avoid saying no comment. That is for every situation just about. If you can avoid saying no comment in front of a camera, some other things you could say instead of that are, here's what I can tell you right now. You could say, in the interest of protecting the investigation, I can only tell you this. You could also say, I'm not able to answer that at this time, but when I can, I will get back to you. So just try and avoid that no comment that usually goes into a negative connotation with media. So across the board, avoid that. And it kind of leads into reputation management. Reputation management is huge, especially right now. It's actually always been really huge. But your job as a public affairs officer or public information officer is to manage the reputation of your agency. And usually that means putting yourself out in order to protect other people in the agency. Up here, I have Edward Murrow. He's a really a pioneer in journalism. He was in World War II and he was known for blasting misinformation and letting people know that what they were reading and hearing was wrong. So he was known for that, and he has a really great quote, which still rings true today. And it says, truth is the best propaganda and lies are the worst. To be persuasive, we must be believable. To be believable, we must be credible. And to be credible, we must be truthful. So the only way that you can have a good reputation is if you're doing good work. You can't fabricate a good reputation. You are doing good work, you have good people, you have good processes. So how can you expand on that? When you're talking to the media, make sure that you know that you could be quoted at any time. Represent your agency on and off duty. This is huge. I see this across social media. This is huge in the military. It's a huge, I wouldn't say it's a big problem, but it can be problematic. Anytime somebody sees you in a uniform, you have to assume that you are representing the agency, and whatever you're doing, if it's on TikTok, doing dances, it's going to fall back onto your command, your leadership. If it's something that drives community engagement and it's within your realm of your communication strategies, by all means. But don't go, I mean, you have to watch your agency, make sure that if you do have members of your agency that are big on social media, they like doing funny trends, just make sure you keep an eye on that. I would suggest everybody in every agency has a standard social media strategy or brief, at least to everyone in the department, where they understand and they establish what the guidelines are, what they can and cannot post or do offline. That will probably save you a lot of heartache in the long run. And when you are talking to your reporters, another thing you want to do is make sure you're vetting the reporters that are reaching out to you, because you want to make sure that they are not, you want to go ahead and ask them, what is your angle? What is your agenda? You can absolutely do that because it is within your control as a public affairs officer. You want to make sure how your agency is going to be portrayed. So I could share this with you guys as well. I do have a production form that I give out to every agency that contacts me and that wants to do any kind of production or news release, anything that is more entertainment geared. I ask them what their synopsis of their production is. I ask them where they're getting their money from for funding and the filming. And I ask them how they feel they're going to be portraying our office, because I need to control that as best as I can. And then also the last thing for reputation management, I advise you to just get rid of all the fluff and no acronyms. So you want to be connecting to the people that you're talking to. So avoid the acronyms as much as you can, and avoid all the adjectives is another way of saying the fluff. We just want to get rid of those adjectives and just speak as briefly and clearly as possible. Are there any questions so far? It's a lot of information. I think that's just about to wrap it up. I have final thoughts is just to make sure that you are developing your command priorities with your leadership before you're doing anything like your social media tactics, before you're making videos, before you're going out on your ride-alongs. Make sure that you are understanding what messages you are trying to communicate before you go out there, so that your agency is cohesive across the board in messaging, and that's going to build up your reputation. Always be ready. Always be ready. If you can, rehearse your main points. If you can, make sure that you know who is going to be speaking, who's your PIO, who is a backup PIO, where they're going to be at certain events. And then my last one again is the ABCs of communication. Make sure you stick to those. And then also network. Yes, I will make this PowerPoint available. And then I also will be sending, thank you, Anthony, you asked that. I also will be sending phrases that they're just good to have in your back pocket in case you get asked some difficult questions. Some examples would be, say you have somebody in your agency that did something felonious, like terrible, and now the media is all over it. Some things you could say about you expect better from your agency, or that you will take care of this unprofessional behavior, some of your processes. So I have about 40 or 50 blurbs that you could use in case you get stuck in a situation. And they're just good to have. They're just good to practice and find one that fits you and fits your organization. So I'll be sending you out that as well. Is there any other questions? Any interview questions? Any press conference questions?
Just switch the feature to allow folks to unmute themselves now that she's completed. So if you do have one, go ahead and instead of the chat, if you want to, just go ahead and speak up and ask any questions or follow up that you have. All right, I don't see any. I put up a slide. So Bill mentioned that there's upcoming, trainings happening, and please look at the screen. And as you can see at the bottom there, they can all be found on our website at cpoa.org. So we're happy to host those. So please take a look at that. And Bill, thank you. And again, great thanks to our presenter Jacqueline and everyone at San Bernardino DA's office for helping us lead this session and getting the information out to you. And as that information that Jacqueline mentioned comes our way, we'll be sure to get that out to everyone, as well as the recording of this session. So I'll go ahead and stop that recording as well.
And again, we extend our thank you to the Police Credit Union for being our exclusive OneSource Premier financial partner and for sponsoring our lead series. We look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you very much.